going to hold a breath and
Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
Looks like we lost hydraulics.
Air crash investigators discover Prop Air Flight 420 faced an onslaught of problems.
What's going on? It wants to roll left.
As pilots attempt to return to the airport, their situation becomes critical.
Fire! The left engine's on fire.
Is that a passenger?
If you can't get that airplane on the ground very quickly, it can kill you in as little as 5 minutes.
Left gear hasn't dropped.
No time to sort that out.
Hold on back there. It's going to be a rough landing. Brace!
They were within a few seconds of everybody being on the ground safe and going home.
That must have been hell.
Cruising altitude of 16,000 feet. The pilots are flying a 14-seat Fairchild Metroliner twin turboprop.
The Metroliner was a fast airplane without burning too much fuel. Having a pressurized cabin, the Metroliner was able to fly at a higher altitude, so it made it more comfortable for the passengers.
Although it's a modern plane, the Metroliner has no autopilot. The first officer is flying manually.
For my dad, being a pilot, it was his dream job. It was his main purpose in life, other than me and my mom, obviously, but he was always talking about it, and it made him really happy.
Today's flight is a 90-minute hop from Dorval to Peterborough, Ontario. The 9 passengers on board are engineers from General Electric, who are headed to Peterborough for project meetings. The plane has been in the air for 12 minutes.
Everything has been normal since takeoff. All of a sudden,
What?
What is it?
Looks like we lost hydraulics.
not only one light, but 2, saying that his hydraulic pressure are failing on both sides, meaning that he will have problem if he keeps proceeding to Peterborough.
Dorval approach, this is Propaf 420. We've had dual hydraulic failure. Request clearance to return to Dorval.
The Metroliner has two hydraulic systems. One controls the flaps, the other the landing gear.
You don't really need the hydraulic systems until you're coming in. It's not a we're going to die at this very moment kind of situation. It's just we have a problem, we need to turn back, and it's standard operating procedure at that point.
Sorry, folks, we have a technical problem. We have to head back to Dorval. Stay in your seats with seat belts fastened. Looks like we're landing without flaps.
With no flaps, the pilots can't reduce their speed without stalling. They'll have to come in fast.
Not having any flaps, it was not really a problem. They had a 12,000-foot runway ahead of them. Time was of the essence. He had to land the airplane very quickly.
Without hydraulics, the landing gear will have to be lowered manually.
It's going to make everything longer and that much harder for you. It's going to delay where you're normally used to doing your configurations.
Then, just 30 seconds after losing hydraulics, before they've started back to the airport,
What's going on? He wants to roll left.
Really?
Holding it right.
something's wrong with the controls.
Need to trim half turn to the right.
That should do it.
If the plane is rolling in one direction, applying trim avoids the need for continuous pilot inputs. Trimming it right brings the left wing up and levels the plane. But as Stricker starts to turn towards Dorval,
Still rolling left.
The airplane wants to turn to the left, and the first officer has to apply more and more right ailerons, which is not normal. It's getting stiffer.
I'm going to give it a few more ticks of aileron trim to the right.
Roger.
Remember, no autopilot, so that's putting a lot of pressure on this first officer. And any pilot who has this kind of problem has to ask himself, is it going to get worse?
Still rolling left.
Yes.
Both engines are working. Why do we need so much trim?
The captain has to be racking his brain. He had more than 5,000 hours on the Metro. He was the chief pilot, a Czech pilot, and he can't seem to make sense of the situation.
they are 12 minutes from Dorval Airport. As they descend through thick clouds, visibility is near zero, and they have to fly on instruments.
Rolling to the left, bang more to the right. Pulling the approach plates for Dorval.
Roger.
As Flight 420 gets halfway back to Dorval,
Fire! The left engine's on fire.
an even bigger problem emerges.
Fire in the left engine? Confirm.
Yes, I see smoke.
The moment any pilot hears fire, he has to take immediate action.
It's a very serious situation. It can kill you in as little as 5 minutes.
Left engine shutdown procedure.
The pilots attempt to extinguish the fire in the left engine.
He's got a plan. What am I going to do? And how much time do I have before I have to land this airplane?
Left power lever.
Confirmed left.
The captain executes the engine shutdown procedure.
Back to idle. Confirm left shut-off lever.
Confirmed.
Pulling left engine stop lever.
Shutting down the engine also cuts off its fuel supply.
The rationale for shutting that engine down is you don't want the fire spreading. That's the biggest concern at this point.
This isn't good. Keep the speed up. Let's get back to Dorval.
when you're shutting down an engine, it's a bit of an alarming situation. It's not a comfortable experience, no matter what you're doing. Airplanes have 2 engines for a reason, and you've cut your redundancy down to 1.
When the winter brings unpredictable weather,
Today is a windy day up on the mountain.
these heroes are here to battle the elements.
Oh, I'm ready for new challenges. Bring it on.
In a season that's rougher
It's a miracle that the driver is alive.
and tougher.
This tipped over now. Stop! Finito, capito. Goodbye.
Now the best team is together.
Ice Road Rescue.
Jakobs 3 u 1. Savršena kombinacija kafe, mleka i šećera. Jakobs te vodi u bioskop. Kupi 12 Jakobs 3 u 1 ili 2 u 1 kesica kafe i zameni ih za kartu u Cineplex bioskopima. Jakobs.
Spremni za kupovinu bez granica. Magazin Gracija i Lili drogerije pozivaju vas na Gracija Black Weekend od 25. do 27. novembra. Očekuje vas 15% popusta na sve, osim na lekove, poklon kartice i već snižene artikle. Dobrodošli, vaše Lili drogerije.
7. Gamescom. Na Beogradskom sajmu od 25. do 27. novembra. Sve novotarije iz sveta gaminga i pop kulture na jednom mestu. Karte vas čekaju na svim prodajnim punktovima Geekstixa. Gamescom. Ponovo na sajmu.
Stižu dani super kupovine. Magazin Gracija i Stadion Shopping Center pozivaju vas na Black Friday weekend.
Od 25. do 27. novembra iskoristite dane neverovatnih popusta do čak 60%.
Priuštite sebi sve što želite. Čekamo vas na dobro poznatoj adresi Zaplanjska 32.
Više na stadionšopingcenter.rs.
Tako, tako, tako je zaprljano.
Pa šta, tu je Somat.
Otkrite Somat Excellence 4 u 1. Savršeno čisto, čak i na ekociklusima pranja sa niskom temperaturom. Moćna kombinacija praha i gela efikasno čisti. Za odličnu čistoću i sjaj. Uz uštedu energije. Prljavi sudovi.
Pa šta?
Somat Excellence 4 u 1.
I never thought I would be a drug smuggler.
I mean, what can go wrong?
The story doesn't end there.
I was going to go to the DEA, and I was going to crush him.
My childhood was stolen from me. I just didn't care.
Here we go.
There was roaches, there was rats, but in reality, it's even worse.
Now my freedom is over.
The new season of Banged Up Abroad on National Geographic.
Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
My controls.
Your controls.
Facing fire, control problems, and an engine shutdown, the captain of Prop Air 420 assumes control.
The airplane was descending from 8,000 feet for its approach. You had altitude that you could trade for airspeed, so with Captain Provencher's experience, shutting down the engine, that was not a problem.
Dorval approach, Prop Air 420. Left engine is on fire. We've shut it down.
Prop Air 420, I see you are returning to Dorval. I can give you direct to Mirabel.
Affirmative. Direct to Mirabel.
While Flight 420 is only 11 minutes from Dorval, they reroute to Montreal's other airport, Mirabel, which is closer.
Montreal approach, Prop Air 420. Requesting ILS. Runway 24, please. What is the frequency?
The long runway at Mirabel will give the crew more room for a high-speed landing.
ILS 24, frequency is 111.7. Inbound course is 240 degrees.
Roger, 111.7. Thank you.
Emergency crews are dispatched to runway 24. Firefighter Michel Brisson remembers the moment the call came in.
We receive a crash call from the tower control, so we take position.
Mirabel Airport being an international airport, they got ready pretty quickly. The airport is fully equipped to receive the crippled airplane with their level of experience with the firemen.
Folks, air traffic control has asked us to reroute to Mirabel.
Flight 420 is now 7 minutes from touchdown.
At this point, they know that behind them are 9 people, and they're going to do everything in their power to get that airplane on the ground as safely and quickly as possible.
I see flames now. Flames from the engine nozzle.
The situation goes from bad to dire. The engine shutdown should have contained the fire. Instead, it's growing.
When the passenger tells the crew that their engine is on fire, they're puzzled.
Let's get this plane on the ground.
Landing checklist. Flaps.
0.
Speed lever.
High RPM.
Their main focus is to fly the airplane, and fly the airplane.
Fire crews park alongside the runway at Mirabel Airport for the emergency landing of Flight 420. Michel Brisson is one of the first on the scene.
We're waiting for the aircraft. The weather was not too good. We couldn't see far.
Trim set to max.
Captain Provencher is struggling to maintain control. He's flying on one engine with no hydraulics, and his plane is on fire. Now he has to lower the landing gear manually, with no guarantee it will work.
Gear down now.
Gear down.
The nose and right wheels have dropped, but one light stays off.
Left gear hasn't dropped.
No time to sort that out.
Provencher has no choice but to put the plane down on only 2 sets of gear.
If I'm in an airplane fighting fire, an engine that I've shut down, controllability issues, we're not going around. You're landing that airplane on that runway, whether you land gear up or not.
Flight 420 is 1 kilometer from the runway.
The clock is ticking. You have to get down and get that airplane on the ground now.
300 feet.
The moment he gets to about 280 feet, he sees the threshold, he sees the fire trap, and he thinks that he's made it and saved 11 lives.
Prop Air 420 is 20 seconds from touchdown.
There was some smoke coming out of the aircraft, and my heart tightened a bit there, and I said to myself, we got some business here this morning.
Okay, here we go.
200 feet. Hold on back there. It's going to be a rough landing. Brace! Rolling left.
Not now!
They're just 5 seconds from being able to touch down.
At this point, the crew would be fighting for every breath they have.
Prop Air 420 is almost on the ground at Montreal's Mirabel Airport when disaster strikes.
Within a split second, the aircraft started to go 90 degrees. And that must have been hell. Captain Provencher probably thought that he was going to die.
I saw the aircraft flip over 180 degrees. That was it. I'll never forget the sound that it made when it touched the ground.
Let's go!
The plane crashes into a watery ditch next to the runway.
My first concern was to go to the fuselage to try to save some lives.
Sylvain Carrière was the fire chief at Mirabel Airport at the time of the incident.
As soon as the aircraft crashed, the firefighters were on the move. They put out the fire with the foam, and then they got close to the aircraft, trying to get inside to rescue the victims. It was very tough on the firefighters. They had to deal with trying to manage water up to their waist. They had to break the windows to get vital signs. The aircraft being upside down, and all the seats were dislodged from their footing. So it was total chaos.
Despite the best efforts of rescue crews, no one makes it out of the plane alive.
We took 3 people out, took their pulse, and there was nothing. Everybody was gone. We're never prepared for that, you know?
I was 7 years old when my dad died. We were really close. I remember my mom crying. She said something terrible happened to your dad and it's not coming back. I thought I was in a dream.
This is why we do these investigations. It's to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Could you please tell me what you saw as the plane was coming in?
Within hours of the accident, investigators from the Transportation Safety Board of Canada get to work.
When it broke through the clouds, there was smoke coming off the plane.
Where was the smoke?
It was on the left side.
There was fire coming out of the left wing and near the motor.
And then what? It exploded.
Yeah. And then it flipped upside down.
Not even 25 feet above the ground, the wing folded and the airplane went to a roll. He was just maybe 5 seconds from landing, but it was just because of the breakup. They could not do anything to really save the situation.
Have a seat.
Investigators need to determine what caused the left wing to fail just 25 feet from the ground. They start by interviewing the Dorval flight controller.
What was the first sign of trouble?
12 minutes into the flight, and they reported hydraulic failure.
Dorval approach, this is Proper 420. We've had dual hydraulic failure. Request clearance to return to Dorval.
Anything else?
30 seconds later, they call in a flight control problem.
We're having control issues.
So, they're headed back to Dorval. They're having hydraulic and control problems. Did they report a fire?
Yes, engine fire.
Investigators realized that the crew was battling multiple system failures. The mystery is how they're all connected.
Dorval approach, Prop Air 420. Left engine is on fire. We've shut it down.
Thank you very much.
The Metroliner doesn't have a flight data recorder on board. Investigators must rely on old-fashioned methods.
We laid down the full aircraft with all the related components to their relative position. The landing gear, the hydraulic systems, the brake components, flaps components.
I say we start here.
Since the left wing failed in the middle, near the engine, investigators decide to tear it down for a full inspection.
We looked at the engine before sending it to the manufacturer for a deeper investigation.
Go a little further in for me, please.
They're looking for any evidence of fire. The exterior has plenty of soot, but inside...
It's clean. I don't see any fire damage.
It's not what they expected.
We could see the engine had no evidence of any fire or fuel lines in the area of the engine.
The engine was running properly as far as we could tell.
Why would the crew report an engine fire when there wasn't one?
When the winter brings unpredictable weather,
Today is a windy day up on the mountain.
these heroes are here to battle the elements.
Oh, I'm ready for new challenges. Bring it on.
In a season that's rougher
It's a miracle that the driver is alive.
and tougher.
This tipped over now.
Stop!
Finito, capito. Goodbye.
Now the best team is together.
Ice Road Rescue.
Merry Merix predstavlja najveću borbu između dve vatre ikada. Zabava, znoj i mnogo prljavštine. Nove Merix Power kapsule sa efektom maksimalne svežine. Tako male, ali sa ogromnom snagom pranja. I maksimalnom svežinom. Nove Merix Power kapsule. Držite van domašaja dece.
Zagrejani za supu već 65 godina. Napravi supu, stvori osjećaj. Podravka.
We dig deeper, push the boundaries further, in a search for discoveries that could rewrite the history books.
It's kind of unusual.
With finds so big,
we should have to go deeper.
We can't show you yet.
Whoa, what an adventure.
A brand new season, Lost Treasures of Egypt, on National Geographic. Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
What?
What is it?
Looks like we lost hydraulics.
Investigators now turn to the cockpit voice recorder of Prop Air 420 to determine why firefighters and the pilots both reported an engine fire.
Stop for a second. Do they even mention fire?
No, not at all.
By now, they're 12 minutes into the flight.
I've got the column halfway to the right. I can't believe it's taken this much trim to hold it straight.
Okay, hang on. Control problems just 30 seconds after hydraulic failure. Okay, Dorval is here. Now they're barely out of the gate before the hydraulics fail here. They haven't even begun their turn, and the controls start acting up here. Okay, let's see what happens next.
Left wing overheat light on.
Overheat?
A wing overheat warning sounds when high temperatures are detected by a sensor in the wheel well.
The wing overheat light is indicating to you that there's smoke, heat, and potentially a fire.
What the?
But the warning mysteriously shuts off 30 seconds later.
Overheat warning light off.
Good. We don't need the checklist.
Before they have a chance to do anything about it, the light goes out. So they say, the problem doesn't exist anymore. We don't have to worry about that.
Several more minutes pass before anyone mentions fire.
Fire! The left engine's on fire!
Is that a passenger?
Fire in the left engine? Confirm.
Yes, I see smoke.
Sounds like it's coming from the cabin.
Now they're here. They finished their turn back to Dorval.
The passenger report of an engine fire confuses the crew.
The engine overheat warning is off. Left engine shutdown procedure.
The captain follows the checklist, but it doesn't solve the problem.
I see flames now. Flames from the engine nozzle.
I don't have the fire light!
Everything in the airplane is telling you the engine isn't on fire, but you have a passenger in your back telling you the engine is on fire. Which road you go down, it's hard to fault a pilot for going down either road at this point.
The cockpit voice recording provides investigators with their biggest lead yet. The initial wing overheat warning could indicate that something in the wheel well was overheating.
Maybe the fire started in the wheel well.
That's so close to the engine, the crew could have made that mistake.
We start zeroing on the fact that this is probably where we should concentrate our efforts.
Is there something within the wheel well that has the potential to catch fire?
Check out the left landing gear.
The team discovers that pieces of the left landing gear are burned, almost beyond recognition. It's an important clue.
We know there has been an in-flight fire at this point because we have pieces of metal that tell us that. We just don't know how it started, what caused it, and this is going to be the big part of this investigation. What caused this fire?
They start by examining the brakes on the left landing gear.
At this point in the investigation, we knew that we had to look at the brakes because we thought that the problem probably began in there, but we weren't sure. We had to find out.
That's everything?
A complete examination of the brake system was performed. Each of the components, calipers, discs, we looked at every details of the brakes.
Some severe damage here.
The team finds that several components of the left side brakes show significant heat damage. Piston housings are melted, cylinders are blackened.
The damage of heat that were done to the components along the brake calipers and the tires and then the wheel well was really the smoking gun.
Investigators can finally confirm that an in-flight fire aboard Prop Air 420 began in the left wheel well. But they still don't know what started it.
This is the left brake disc, correct?
One component is key.
Thing got pretty hot somehow.
The grayish-blue color stands out.
These brake discs would have to get to a temperature of 1100 degrees Fahrenheit or 600 degrees Celsius for 5 or 6 minutes in order to get to that color.
Could overheated brakes have started the fire that brought down Prop Air 420? The landing gear would need a fuel source to ignite, but the wheel well is nowhere near the heavily reinforced tanks.
Something in here must have caused the brakes to catch fire.
Investigators focus on the tubing inside the left wheel well, called the nacelle.
Hydraulic line there.
In the design of the left wheel well nacelle, you have the hydraulic lines that run through there to operate the landing gear, also for the flaps.
Dorval approach, this is Prop Air 420. We've had dual hydraulic failure. Request clearance to return to Dorval.
The melted lines would cause the hydraulics to fail, the first problem reported by the crew.
So, the heat from the brakes melts the line, hydraulic fluid pours out everywhere. There's your fire, right there.
It's a good theory, but they need evidence to back it up. Investigators design a test to determine if hydraulic fluid could ignite when exposed to overheated brakes.
Is this the same make of brake disc that was used in the Metroliner?
They heat the disc to 1100 degrees Fahrenheit, the temperature that would have been needed to give the left brake discs their grayish-blue color.
We sprayed a small quantity of hydraulic fluid at a rate of 2 tablespoons per minute.
Whoa.
Investigators are able to prove that the left brake disc on board Prop Air 420 did get hot enough to ignite the hydraulic fluid.
And it started the ignition of a flame 8 inches high.
But they still don't know why the brake discs overheated. Could there have been a malfunction with the brakes?
Let's have a look.
Investigators look through old Metroliner incident reports.
I've got something for you.
In the United States, about 10 years before, a Metroliner exactly had the same problem.
1988 Peninsula Airways. Loss of hydraulic pressure, left wing overheat, left wheel well fire damage.
And that one in Winnipeg, 1990, Perimeter Airline. Exact same thing.
In both those cases, the crews were able to land the plane safely.
The history of the Metroliner revealed to us, that the brake system had issues. We combined something like 68 events, that were involving the brake systems.
Why does this keep happening?
The incident reports reveal a similar culprit in many of these incidents: brake dragging.
For the brake to have gotten that hot, it had to have been dragging.
brake drag is what happens when the calipers don't fully retract from the disc as the brakes are released.
The brake disc overheated because there was probably still some pressure on them, and so the wheels were not turning freely. This dragging of the brakes got the temperature higher and higher.
Investigators conclude the dragging must have occurred while taxiing at Dorval Airport.
Nose wheel steering.
Armed.
Naturally, there will be a lot of heat developed on that brake system if it's dragging as the airplane accelerates. But for that kind of heat to develop, the left brake had to be dragging for some period of taxi time.
To find out how long the left brake might have been dragging, the team talks to the controller overseeing the flight's departure from Dorval Airport.
They taxied from the hangar there to the runway here.
Did the crew report anything unusual on the taxi?
This isn't surprising if the brakes were only dragging on one side.
The way you taxi a Metroliner, you have a nose wheel steering. But just one dragging brake, you can turn the nose wheel steering gear and you won't be able to notice that the brake is dragging. So this is possibly what happened.
Pilot 420, we're holding in position, runway 24 left, ready for takeoff.
What about the takeoff?
It took them a long time to get airborne.
Really? Where did they lift off? That's more than halfway down the runway.
The plane lifted off between the A1 and A2 taxiways, which are between 4,100 and 5,500 feet from the runway threshold.
So takeoff distance to rotation should be 1,800 feet. And this plane took more than 4,000.
The problem with the brakes began probably as the airplane departed the hangar.
It must have been the brake drag.
They used 1,400 feet to go to the threshold of 24 left. So for about 5,200 feet, the brakes were dragging and creating a lot of overheating on the disc of the brakes.
The findings back up their suspicions. The brakes must have been dragging, which explains why it took the plane so long to reach takeoff speed.
One. Rotate.
And they went up in the wheel well, very, very hot.
12 minutes in the air is plenty of time for the overheated brakes to raise the temperature in the wheel well.
When the landing gear comes up, the doors close, and then if you have any heat in there, that heat has nowhere to dissipate. So the temperature inside goes up very, very quickly.
But what could have caused the brake drag in the first place?
What about the parking brake?
Just like in your car, if you drove away with the parking brake on and you keep driving, it's still going to create friction, which therein creates heat.
Parking brake off.
Roger.
Investigators wonder if there was an issue when the captain released the parking brake.
If the parking brake had been on, you would have had both rotors overheat. Only one wheel overheated. So somehow, whenever the parking brake was released, one of them let go, the right side, the other one didn't. Otherwise, you would have had two fires.
They search the manufacturer's documentation for evidence of faulty parking brakes.
Now here's something.
A 5-year-old newsletter advises pilots to verify the parking brake is fully released.
Some residual pressure can remain even with the knob in the off position.
I'm sad as a pilot to see that this information was through newsletters and not into the aircraft flight manual. It was very deceiving to see this.
Were the pilots unaware of a faulty parking brake? Without a flight data recorder and with the pilots deceased, they'll never know for sure. But it's a solid theory.
All right, so the brake drag caused the wheel well fire, right?
The team has finally determined how the fire started, but there's one question remaining.
Could the crew have done anything to prevent any of this from happening?
Let's start the pre-flight procedures.
This flight went from being routine into a life-threatening crisis.
Damn it!
In seconds.
Do you copy?
Who was guilty? Who was to blame?
No one notices what's happening. Until it's too late.
The new season of Air Crash Investigations Special Report on National Geographic.
The ocean shrouds its secrets in darkness. Now, its sunken stories are being brought to light.
What was the key to life and death?
This has really turned into a mystery.
It was known as the eighth wonder of the world.
Could the Emperor be in the cargo hold?
It was like a detective story.
Brand new Drain the Oceans on National Geographic.
Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
When you take the controls, make sure to make smooth inputs on the nose wheel steering. Passengers can feel it. We want to give them a nice ride.
Investigators return to earlier in the cockpit voice recording to see if the crew of Prop Air 420 realized their brakes were dragging.
That's the captain's voice, so he's steering.
Right. The first officer takes over on the takeoff roll.
I have control.
Your controls.
The first hint of trouble starts soon after.
More right rudder, more right rudder.
So the captain's correcting the first officer. Plane must be drifting left of center on the runway.
Probably because the left brake is dragging.
It's going left, more right rudder.
The captain starts telling the co-pilot, more rudder, more rudder. That's when the problem of a brake dragging should have been evident, but because he's checking the co-pilot, he's not on the controls himself. Had he been on the controls himself, with his experience, he would have known.
The captain makes no mention of the plane taking longer than usual to lift off.
He's doing a line check. He's busy. He's got to make sure that the first officer is doing the jobs that he's supposed to do. It's an honest mistake.
Investigators finally understand what caused the crash of Prop Air Flight 420. A dragging left brake gets hot enough to melt the hydraulic lines when the wheel is retracted after takeoff.
Dorval approach, this is Prop Air 420. We've had dual hydraulic failure. Request clearance to return to Dorval.
They're thinking that it's just a hydraulic failure. We'll request back to the airport and we'll land there safely.
Dripping hydraulic fluid ignites.
Left wing overheat light on.
They have no idea that they've got a brake fire that is starting to rage in the left nacelle.
Overheat warning light off.
Good. We don't need the checklist.
What likely happened at that point is that the circuit probably was burnt through by the fire that is developing in that nacelle.
The intense heat begins to weaken the structure of the left wing, causing it to lose lift.
What's going on? It wants to roll left.
Like any kind of metal, as it superheats, it's going to distort and change its shape. So they're dealing with an aerodynamics of the wing. You're never going to know if it moves 2 degrees, but you're going to feel it on your control call.
Fire! The left engine's on fire!
The engine overheat warning is off. I don't have a fire light!
There's definitely fire.
Pulling left engine, stop lever.
Well, they did the right thing. They had to shut it down.
Yeah. They were really up against it. And all that happened in just 5 minutes.
When we train on board simulators, we rarely give more than 2 problems to a pilot because it's very unusual that you will have compounding problems like Prop Air 420 had. Despite the high level of experience of Captain Provencher, he probably never trained for all these emergencies at one time.
Despite everything,
Gear down now!
they almost made it.
Left gear hasn't dropped.
As the situation continued to deteriorate.
From an investigator's standpoint, he did a perfect job. He was coming right at the center, and he was coming at a good rate of descent.
One final problem is insurmountable. The captain doesn't know it, but
Not now!
the fire has weakened the wing's structure.
If that wing hadn't failed upwards, they were within a few seconds of everybody being on the ground safe and going home. At this point, if you're a pilot, you're along for the ride in that airplane.
They did everything right. They didn't have a chance.
I met with the widow of the captain. I did mention to her the reason why that airplane crashed was beyond the cruise control, is that they did not have enough information to be able to determine what the real problem was. And I told her that. You meet people like that, and you never forget.
In its final report, the Transportation Safety Board noted that unlike many other planes, the Metroliner did not have a brake overheat warning in the cockpit, and the aircraft flight manual did not clearly warn pilots that brake dragging could lead to wheel well fires.
The first recommendation that the board issued was to make sure that the crew was aware that if an overheat light came on that nacelle, you probably had a good chance of having a fire starting or developing in that nacelle.
Checklists were changed, and we were able to make it a lot safer for people going forward.
Even though my dad's been gone for 22 years, he's still helping a lot of people. It makes me really proud of my father. I'm gonna be able to tell my children he did everything he could for the passengers.
Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
UPS 1354 Heavy, runway 18, clear to land.
In a populated area, near a highway, an Airbus A300 crashes short of the runway.
Tower, did you see that?
Neither pilot has survived.
We're a very small pilot group, so you start thinking about who it may have been and exactly what happened.
After listening to conversations in the cockpit,
I'm gonna do vertical speed.
He kept us high.
and running the flight through a simulator,
How'd you miss all this?
investigators are forced to take a different approach.
At 11 a.m., an eyewitness spots her in the hotel restaurant.
You can set yourself up for failure in a safety-critical job like flying an aircraft.
It's an early summer morning when UPS Flight 1354 climbs over Kentucky.
Autopilot 1 command.
Autopilot 1 command.
58-year-old Saria Beale Jr. has been flying with UPS for more than 20 years.
UPS 1354, climb and maintain flight level 280.
280, 1354.
37-year-old First Officer Shanda Fanning has been with the delivery company for 7 years.
They were respected. They were experienced aviation professionals. They were very representative of the type of pilots that UPS hires.
280.
28.
Tonight's flight from Louisville, Kentucky to Birmingham, Alabama takes about an hour.
Overnight cargo is a very time-sensitive product. Everybody's familiar with UPS and their next-day air product. So if we have an airplane that's late, it may affect scores of our outbound flights. We don't have the luxury of booking our packages on the next available flight because the next available flight might not be for 24 hours.
The crew is flying the newest version of the Airbus A300, equipped with advanced computers and flight management systems to assist pilots.
Notice to airmen, runway 24 closed.
Shortly after reaching cruising altitude, the pilots receive a NOTAM, a Notice to Airmen message.
NOTAMs provide information regarding hazards that you may encounter so that there are no surprises en route or when you arrive.
Localizer runway 18 in use. Landing and departing runway 18.
The runway they were expecting is closed for maintenance. They'll have to use an alternate.
They're saying 24 is closed. They want us to take runway 18.
Runway 18? Figures.
I know, especially since we're a little heavy.
Yep. I guess I'll brief it. Briefing guide?
The alternate runway is shorter. With the plane nearly at maximum weight, they'll have to carefully manage their speed and altitude on approach.
Verify VNAV path on the approach chart.
Pilots prefer longer runways because with a shorter runway, there's not a lot of margin for error.
Load the approach into the flight computer.
Landing on runway 18 also involves a more demanding approach, known as a non-precision approach. In a non-precision approach, pilots pre-program the flight computer to follow a virtual glide path or descent profile to the runway threshold.
Non-precision approach, it's not practiced as much. The only times flight crews ever see them perhaps would be in training, in a simulator, and then maybe once in a while on the line.
Verify the glide path agrees with the approach chart within 1 degree.
Verify approach to 0.1 degrees.
When you're shooting a non-precision approach, your workload increases dramatically. You have to watch your airspeed, you have to watch your altitude.
28 minutes into the flight, UPS 1354 begins its descent towards Birmingham, Alabama.
UPS 1354, descend at pilot's discretion. Maintain 11,000.
The crew is cleared to continue descending to 11,000 feet.
That works. We'll keep it going.
UPS 1354, we'll keep her going down to 11.
Roger, UPS 1354.
They're generous today. Usually they kind of take you up to 15 and hold you up there.
I know, they hold you up high.
Visibility is poor as the plane descends to 11,000 feet.
If you're flying in the clouds and it's already nighttime, you have a black screen. If you look out, there's nothing out there. It's the black abyss, if you will.
UPS 1354 Heavy, Birmingham Tower, descend and maintain 2,500. Runway 24 is still closed. You want 18?
The controller confirms that the crew cannot use the airport's longer runway.
Yeah.
Yes, sir, 18 will work.
Copy that. Turn right 10 degrees. Join the localizer.
Okay, turn right, join the localizer.
last few minutes before landing can be very busy for the flight crew. A lot's going on, and you have to be at the top of your game.
Flaps 15.
Speed checks. Flaps 15.
8 miles from the airport, the crew configures the plane for landing.
UPS 1354 Heavy, runway 18, clear to land.
18, clear to land, 1354.
Speed brakes armed. Ignition continuous relight. Landing checklist is complete.
5 miles from the runway, the captain realizes something's not right.
Unbelievable. Too high.
The autopilot hasn't initiated its final descent to the airport. The captain tries to get the plane back on its programmed glide path. If the plane remains too high this close to the runway, the crew could overshoot it.
Instruments cross-checked. No flags.
The first officer sees no problems with the descent.
2 miles to go. I've got the runway in sight out there, 12 o'clock.
Got the runway in sight.
Autopilot's off.
The captain prepares to fly the plane manually to touchdown.
Pilots switch off the autopilot to land the airplane manually in the situation of a non-precision approach. It's a required maneuver to actually manually land the aircraft.
As they get closer to the airport,
Did I hit something?
Oh no!
Rain. Good look, rain.
the pilots can't control the plane as it cuts through a small grove. UPS Flight 1354 crashes, just 1 mile short of the runway.
Tower, did you see that?
Yes, yes. Airport 12, there's been a crash. UPS 1354 Heavy crashed on the hill. Attention, aircraft crash, 3 miles final runway 18.
We dig deeper, push the boundaries further, in a search for discoveries that could rewrite the history books.
It's kind of unusual.
With finds so big,
We should have to go deeper.
we can't show you yet.
Whoa, what an adventure.
A brand new season, Lost Treasures of Egypt, on National Geographic.
Kad god imam vremena, treniram. Nije mi teško.
Trudim se da na poslu dam sve od sebe. Nije mi teško.
Uživam dok kuvam i spremam kuću. Volim da sve blista. Nije mi teško, ali je teško kada bol udari.
Kombojezik je kombinacija dve aktivne supstance koja brže i jače ublažava bol u odnosu na pojedinačne komponente u istoj dozi.
Uz Kombojezik bol ne može da me zaustavi.
Pre upotrebe detaljno proučiti uputstvo o indikacijama, merama opreza i neželjenim reakcijama na lek. Posavjetujte se sa lekarom ili farmaceutom.
Iskoristite do 30% popusta na sve Golden Rose proizvode do 29. novembra. 7. Gamescom. Na Beogradskom sajmu od 25. do 27. novembra. Sve novotarije iz sveta gaminga i pop kulture na jednom mestu. Karte vas čekaju na svim prodajnim punktovima Geekstixa. Gamescom. Ponovo na sajmu.
When the winter brings unpredictable weather,
Today is a windy day up on the mountain.
these heroes are here to battle the elements.
Oh, I'm ready for new challenges. Bring it on.
In a season that's rougher
It's a miracle that the driver is alive.
and tougher.
This tipped over now.
Stop!
Finito, capito. Goodbye.
Now the best team is together.
Ice Road Rescue. Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
Rescue crews rush to extinguish the flames of UPS Flight 1354. Despite the plane coming down in a populated area and crossing a highway in Birmingham, Alabama, no one on the ground is injured. Tragically, both pilots are killed. Within hours, the National Transportation Safety Board begins the investigation.
Looks like the plane struck some trees here, then crashed into the ground here, and then slid for 1,400 feet. Did we find the nose?
The wreckage is spread over a large area.
Yes, I believe we did. Yeah, it's here.
Investigators look for the four corners of the aircraft to determine if the entire plane has reached the accident site.
Four corners refer to the nose, both wings, and tail. You want to take all of them into account, just because it tells such a story about how the airplane struck.
Tail and right wing were found here.
Fragments of the left wing were found here.
All four corners are at the crash site. The plane was intact until it hit the ground.
It wasn't a structural problem. Did anyone see the accident?
If the plane was intact, investigators wonder if the pilots were having difficulty controlling it prior to impact.
No eyewitnesses. Just what we documented at the crash site.
Let's look at how they hit those trees.
Impact marks on trees may provide additional clues.
It's critical for investigators to look at all the things that this aircraft may have struck. In this particular accident, we know that the airplane had flown through trees. When you look at those trees, you want to see what the attitude of the aircraft was. Was it wings level? Was it rolled one direction or the other direction? Was it a very steep pitch attitude?
What were the height of the impact marks?
Tree 14, 43.1 feet.
Investigators use the height of the impact marks to determine the orientation of the plane when it struck the trees.
The plane is level. These guys had control of the aircraft.
Absolutely.
If the pilots were in control of a structurally sound plane, what else could have caused them to crash short of the runway?
Maybe the engines failed.
It's imperative to look at the engines to give us an idea of thrust levels. And surprisingly, if the engines are intact, more or less, you can tell this.
Let's start with the blades.
Investigators examined the A300's engines to see if they were generating power at the time of the accident.
Blades were spinning.
You can look in the front of the engine, and if the fan blades, for instance, are bent in the opposite direction of rotation, that means that when the aircraft's engine struck the ground, it was on.
Debris is shredded.
The debris ingested during impact confirms to investigators that the engines were functioning.
Was an engine failure.
Maybe they ran into a storm.
with no real leads to explain why the plane crashed. The team considers if weather was a possible factor.
If the weather was poor and the pilots couldn't see the ground well at all, then perhaps they made mistakes on the approach itself.
This is the weather from 2 minutes before the accident.
No storms. Wind is calm. This all looks pretty good.
Wait, there was a broken cloud ceiling at the airport, 1,000 feet. This is the ground, and this is the cloud cover.
The cloud ceiling is the distance from the ground to the base of the lowest clouds.
That's pretty low.
Flight 1354 would only descend from clouds at 1,000 feet.
What was the decision altitude for their approach?
The decision altitude is the altitude at which the crew must be able to see the runway, or else abandon their approach.
Decision heights, they're all pretty much a hard floor, especially in the weather, should not be broken. You should not go below the decision altitude unless you see the runway.
Decision altitude was 1,200 feet.
If the clouds didn't break until 1,000 feet, they wouldn't have seen the runway for their decision altitude.
So why didn't they turn around?
That low to the ground, at night, you don't have time to hit and hope. You have to go around and get it together and try it again.
Did lack of visibility cause the pilots to descend too rapidly and crash short of the runway?
Maybe the controller knows something.
Were they concerned at all about the approach?
Investigators interview the air traffic controller to understand why the pilots of Flight 1354 descended so low while in thick clouds.
They didn't say anything. Everything seemed fine.
The air traffic controller can tell the investigator what he heard from the flight crew, if they sounded or reported anything unusual, anything that he wasn't expecting.
Was there anything out of the ordinary that night?
Yeah. The runway they were scheduled to land on was closed, so they had to use the alternate. It's a non-precision approach.
UPS 1354 Heavy.
Birmingham Tower, descend and maintain 2,500. Runway 24 is still closed.
You want 18?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. 18 will work.
So they shot a non-precision with no eyes on the runway.
Knowing what the weather was, knowing what the crew thought the weather was, knowing what information they were given about the weather, told us a lot about how they executed the approach.
Thank you.
Why did the crew continue their non-precision approach in heavy clouds?
Do we have the data from the flight recorders?
Those two black boxes are very critical to investigators because they're electronic witnesses.
Here's the approach they should have taken. The plan was to come in slow and steady at about a 3-degree angle.
Using the FDR data, investigators reconstruct the final approach path of Flight 1354.
Here's what they actually did.
In this particular instance, the critical phase of flight, which was approach, were they doing what they were supposed to be doing? Investigators can compare that then against what the airplane was actually doing.
The crew's approach was far from a steady descent.
The controller cleared them to 2,500 feet.
But they leveled out a little higher than that, which shouldn't be a problem.
Flaps 15.
Speed checks. Flaps 15.
UPS 1354 heavy, runway 18, clear to land.
Looks like they fly past the descent profile they pre-programmed into the computer here.
Try to get back on track, but end up descending steeply below the flight path and never recover.
How fast were they coming down?
Did the crew descend too quickly as they tried to get back on track?
Check this out.
Wow, 1,500 feet per minute. The descent is way too fast so close to the ground.
They confirmed that the plane descended at a rate outside safety guidelines for a final approach. It's an important clue.
Any pilot looking at this would understand that they were descending way too fast, this close to the runway.
You would think that the pilot would have started bottoming out. That is, slowing that rate of descent a lot sooner than he did.
What would make him think they need to descend that fast to get back on the glide path?
Investigators dig deeper into the FDR data.
That's a strange way to program the autopilot.
The team notices that just after the plane flew past the descent profile, the autopilot is set to a mode called vertical speed. The mode is used to descend quickly at higher altitudes, not on final approach.
This complicates the job of the pilot very, very much. He has less time to think about things. He has less time to react to things. So it's simply not a good thing.
Why were they descending so quickly, so close to the ground?
The FDR data only tells investigators what the pilots did, not why.
We need the cockpit voice recorder.
When you add to that what the pilots were saying, and you match that with what the airplane was doing, investigators have a pretty complete picture of what was going on.
Okay, let's hear it.
UPS 1350.
The cockpit voice recorder, it tells us, more or less, what's going through the minds of the flight crew.
Runway 18.
They listen as the pilots make their vertical speed adjustments while they configure their landing.
To land, 1354. Speed brakes armed. Ignition continuous relay. Landing checklist is complete.
Unbelievable. Too high.
Let's see. You're in vertical speed.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a vertical speed. He kept us high.
Hold it there. Captain thinks the plane didn't lock on to the programmed descent profile because the controller kept them too high. Bring up the recommended altitude.
Investigators check the altitude the computer required the plane to reach before commencing the automated descent.
2,300 feet. That's only a few hundred feet too high.
Even though the captain believed the plane didn't descend because the controller kept them too high, the computer should have initiated its programmed descent at that higher altitude.
Maybe there was a problem with the flight computer.
I never thought I would be a drug smuggler.
I mean, what can go wrong?
The story doesn't end there.
I was gonna go to the DEA, and I was gonna crush him.
My childhood was stolen from me. I just didn't care.
Here we go.
There was roaches, there was rats, but in reality, it's even worse.
Now my freedom is over.
The new season of Banged Up Abroad on National Geographic.
Zagrejani za supu već 65 godina. Napravi supu, stvori osjećaj. Podravka.
Vamos a McDonald's?
Vamos a McDonald's?
맥도날드 좀 가져다 주시겠어요?
Fancy mac and cheese?
Hey! McDonald's?
Makers?
Vamos ao McDonald's!
Sure.
You went to McDonald's without me?
I mean, you could have asked.
Sorry.
Can't eat an apology.
Jakobs 3 u 1. Savršena kombinacija kafe, mleka i šećera. Jakobs te vodi u bioskop. Kupi 12 Jakobs 3 u 1 ili 2 u 1 kesica kafe i zameni ih za kartu u Cineplex bioskopima. Jakobs.
Kad stigneš kući s posla želiš Glovo. Neki sastojak ti fali, ima Glovo. Nestalo je pelena, naruči Glovo. Pokloni, pizza, cveće, Glovo. Naruči sve što ti znači i proslavi na svoj način. Ding dong Glovo, ding dong Glovo, ding ding dong Glovo.
Skini aplikaciju, naruči Glovo i mi ti dostavljamo.
Kada otvoriš Pepsi Max, dobiješ maksimalan ukus, 0 šećera, ali nemoj da misliš da ćeš dobiti savršeno telo sa 0 vežbanja. Milione lajkova sa 0 talenta, jer to nije realno. Ono što jeste realno je sjajan Pepsi Max ukus, maksimalan ukus sa 0 šećera. Zato prati svoj ukus i probaj Pepsi Max.
Tako, tako, tako je zaprljano.
Pa šta, tu je Somat.
Otkrite Somat Excellence 4 u 1. Savršeno čisto, čak i na ekociklusima pranja sa niskom temperaturom. Moćna kombinacija praha i gela efikasno čisti. Za odličnu čistoću i sjaj. Uz uštedu energije. Prljavi sudovi?
Pa šta?
Somat Excellence 4 u 1.
Let's start the pre-flight procedures.
This flight went from being routine into a life-threatening crisis.
Damn it!
In seconds.
Do you copy?
Who was guilty? Who was to blame?
No one notices what's happening. Till it's too late.
The new season of Air Crash Investigations Special Report on National Geographic. Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
Verify the glide path agrees with the approach chart within 1 degree.
Did a malfunction in the flight computer used to program the autopilot lead to the crash of UPS Flight 1354?
Verify approach, 0.1 degrees.
The flight management system to an airline pilot in an airline operation like this is very critical because it is the automation. It is the typical way of flying a large aircraft. If you have bad data in, that data will cause bad things to happen.
Okay. Let's hook this up.
Investigators recover the flight computer's memory card from the wreckage. They prepare to test it for signs of errors or malfunctions.
The investigators went to great pains to figure out what exactly was loaded into the flight management computer. It was damaged, so they had to remove the motherboard and place it in a functioning unit and actually read it out.
This should tell us if the computer was working.
If the flight computer was operational, investigators should be able to download its memory.
It's working.
Turned out that there was nothing wrong with the flight management computer. But had there been, that could have been a very important part of the accident sequence.
The computer was working.
Looks like they programmed it. Final approach is armed for a gradual descent of 3 degrees. Wait a minute. They've got 2 separate destinations programmed. They forgot to clear the conflict.
They discover the crew missed a step in planning their route to Birmingham Airport. They failed to clear a previously programmed destination. It's a troubling find.
You can load a flight plan into it, and then if you deviate from that particular flight plan, the flight management computer doesn't really know what's going on and can put out false data, and that's called a discontinuity.
The crew programmed the plane to fly directly to Birmingham Airport. 20 miles out, they needed to clear their flight path and program a specific approach to runway 18. But the crew didn't clear the initial plan, which created the discontinuity, a confusion in the system.
So there was a conflict between where the pilots told the airplane to start the approach and where the computer knew the approach had to start. And that was a flight plan discontinuity.
That's why the autopilot wouldn't initiate the descent path.
The captain basically was chasing the incorrect guidance that the display was telling him by trying to descend as quickly as he could when there was no reason for it.
The team knows the crew didn't clear the conflict. The question is, why?
Let's listen to what was going on when they should have cleared it.
They focus on the moment the crew got the instruction from the controller to go to runway 18.
Okay, here it is.
You want 18?
The controller reminds the crew that they must use an alternate runway.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. 18 will work.
Copy that. Turn right 10 degrees, join the localizer.
Okay. Turn right, join the localizer. I don't think we have many choices if runway 6 is closed.
At that moment, the crew should have cleared the discontinuity and reprogrammed the approach.
I know. What can we do?
I'm like, are you going to unroll another one out there for us real quick?
The crew make a few light-hearted comments.
Gear down.
Gear down. Speed checks.
There was some glad handing a little bit, some humorous comments being made there. They should have probably knuckled down and focused strictly on what needed to be done.
The first officer gets distracted and forgets to clear the discontinuity.
Look, lapses in concentration happen. That's why you have two pilots. But did the captain really miss this too?
Pilots are meant to monitor each other to catch mistakes. So how did they both miss such a critical step?
It's just 5 minutes before the accident. Plenty of time to see the mistake.
For investigators, they have to try and determine why didn't they see this discontinuity? Why didn't they remedy it?
What exactly were they seeing on their displays during this 5 minutes?
Let's run it through the simulator.
The simulations are very helpful to investigators. If the accident occurred because of crew action or inaction, simulations can tell investigators what the crew encountered.
Take it to 442, where they should have cleared the discontinuity.
Investigators prepare to see exactly what the pilots saw during the final 5 minutes of the flight. They scan the cockpit instruments for clues as to why the first officer didn't correct her error.
In this case, the first officer's job really was to glue her eyes to the instruments. She was the non-flying pilot, and that was really her only job.
I know. What else can we do? Gear down.
Gear down.
Have a look at this. It's telling them to take two different approaches.
When the first officer didn't clear the discontinuity, the flight computer displayed two routes to the airport.
That ought to tell you something's wrong.
There should never be two. You can't be two places at one time.
It should have been a single line, but the computer couldn't figure out, because of the discontinuity, where to start the approach.
The discontinuity message is right here on the flight computer, too.
Speed brakes armed. Ignition continuous relight. Landing checklist is complete.
Unbelievable. They kept us high.
How'd she miss all this?
They conclude that there were plenty of signs telling the pilots what they had done wrong.
Oh no!
Did I hit something?
But they still don't understand how they failed to notice them in time to prevent this tragic accident.
Oh, God.
You can have information buried in an instrument that isn't in your focal view or in your peripheral vision. That's one thing. But if it's prominently displayed and you don't see it, the question that we as investigators have to answer is, why not?
No!
Investigators have identified serious piloting errors in the crew of Flight 1354.
How qualified were they?
They study the pilot's personnel records.
Captain's got more than 3,000 hours on the A300. Passed all his latest checks. Looks good.
First officer's a little new to the aircraft. She's got plenty of experience. Ticks all the boxes.
This approach was certainly not beyond their abilities. They had good records.
Any other clues?
This could be something.
If you're flying this time of day, you always feel fatigued.
Yep.
I mean, I was out and I slept today. I slept good.
Me too.
And when my alarm went off, I am still thinking I am so tired.
I know, exactly.
She was tired.
Mm-hmm. Question is, how tired?
Did the first officer get enough rest before the flight?
Being fatigued, it's been characterized like being inebriated. You can see something, you can recognize that there's an issue there, but you're not really analyzing the gravity of the situation.
The schedules that cargo pilots fly can be very punishing, very demanding, primarily because we operate throughout the nighttime hours. We know that fatigue is a significant flight risk.
She had 14-hour rest period before her final shift.
How much rest did she actually get?
There's enough analytical data that demonstrates that a human needs this amount of rest, period. You can set reasonable rest periods, and it's then up to the human to abide by that rest period in a safety-critical job like flying an aircraft.
It says here she swiped the key into her hotel room at just after 6 a.m., but records show she was on her cell and tablet at 6:49 a.m. At 11 a.m., an eyewitness spots her in the hotel restaurant.
Did she head back to her room for more rest after that?
She didn't swipe back into her hotel room until 3:22 p.m. But she was on her cell phone and tablet until 5 p.m.
From the evidence that investigators got, it's clear she did not manage her rest period effectively, and she could have.
So it looks like she had a rest period between 5 and 6:30, but then she was back on her personal devices and called her husband before reporting for duty at 8:30 p.m.
She can't have slept more than 5.5 hours in her 14-hour layover.
Yeah.
5.5 hours in fits and starts is less than the recommended 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep.
Okay, turn right, join the localizer. I don't think we have many choices if runway 6 is closed.
Interpreting information during a non-precision approach when you're fatigued, when you have to do other duties, such as call out altitudes and airspeeds and so on and so forth, is very difficult.
Investigators conclude that the first officer's fatigue likely contributed to this accident.
The problem is that we've had a number of accidents in the cargo industry that have been related in some way, shape, or form to fatigue.
The first accident that actually referenced fatigue was almost 20 years ago at Guantanamo Bay.
One last flight, guys.
In AIA Flight 808, the crew had been awake for 15 hours before flying cargo to Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. The flight ended in a horrific accident. The NTSB's findings in that investigation changed the industry's view of fatigue.
It shined light on the issue of fatigue being, as much of a safety risk as a mechanical issue on an airplane.
Pilots are no longer expected to fly fatigued. Yet 15 accidents have been attributed to fatigue between 1993 and 2013.
Fatigue is real. We need to recognize it. We need to mitigate it.
Investigators now know that the first officer's fatigue played a part in this accident. But a question still remains.
Why didn't the captain catch the first officer's mistakes? Was he fatigued too?
We dig deeper, push the boundaries further, in a search for discoveries that could rewrite the history books.
It's kind of unusual.
With finds so big,
we should have to go deeper.
We can't show you yet.
Whoa, what an adventure.
A brand new season, Lost Treasures of Egypt, on National Geographic.
Kada otvoriš Pepsi Max, dobiješ maksimalan ukus, 0 šećera, ali nemoj da misliš da ćeš dobiti savršeno telo sa 0 vežbanja. Milione lajkova sa 0 talenta, jer to nije realno. Ono što jeste realno je sjajan Pepsi Max ukus, maksimalan ukus sa 0 šećera. Zato prati svoj ukus i probaj Pepsi Max.
God, and the law. You two really are a pair.
It feels so.
Who gave you the gun?
You're a very silly boy sometimes.
Do you understand the severity of your actions?
Register. New season premieres this Wednesday at 10 p.m. on Fox Crime.
The ocean shrouds its secrets in darkness. Now, its sunken stories are being brought to light.
What was the key to life and death?
This has really turned into a mystery.
It was known as the 8th wonder of the world.
Could the Emperor be in the cargo hold?
It was like a detective story.
Brand new Drain the Oceans on National Geographic.
Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
Captain had 7 days off. Yeah, he went to bed early, had a nap.
Records show the captain of UPS 1354 met the required amount of rest before the flight.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a vertical speed. He kept us high.
The captain, he had some days off, and so he should have been well rested. We don't know all of his activities, but he should have been the most rested pilot.
If not fatigue, then what?
Investigators need to dig deeper. They return to the CVR transcript for insight into the captain's frame of mind.
Check this out. The captain mentions being too high 4, 5, 6 times.
For a captain to be so fixated on that one flight parameter puts up a red flag for investigators.
Sounds like television.
The captain was very focused on his altitude. He said many, many times, we're high, we need to get down. When you become that focused, everything else kind of flies out the window.
They did seem to be fixated on the fact that they were too high, and then at some point, of course, they were far too low.
Investigators now know what happened to UPS Flight 1354.
Okay, turn right, join the localizer. I don't think we have many choices if runway 6 is closed.
A tired first officer misses a critical step in preparing for the approach into Birmingham.
We know she was fatigued. We know that the non-precision approaches increased the workload on the pilots.
And misses the cues telling her she made the mistake.
Finals activated.
If you put them all together, the workload, the fatigue, her role in helping the pilot by monitoring the instruments, she never recognized that there was a discontinuity.
Because of her mistake, the plane overflies the pre-programmed descent path.
Unbelievable. He kept us high.
Safety is compromised with distraction, complacency, the fact that, you get zoned out, you get focused, tunnel vision.
A captain already fixated on altitude misses the first officer's error.
Let's see. You're in vertical speed.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a vertical speed. He kept us high.
Forces the plane into a steep descent to get back on track.
They failed to recognize that the automation wasn't doing what they thought it would be doing.
And never recovers.
They realized that they were in danger only seconds before the accident. By that point, it was too late.
In their final report, the NTSB recommends that cargo operators require a crew briefing on the threat of fatigue before each flight.
If you're fatigued, you gotta call it out, because your performance as a human degrades. And while we want to push through and accomplish the mission, the problem is you can set yourself up or your crewmate for failure because of your lack of performance.
Since our accident in Birmingham, the company has done a fantastic job in the training department. We've also negotiated for sleep rooms so we can go take a mid-duty nap during the sorting of the packages process. Our pilots will tell you they're a game changer.
It took a lot of little errors by all the major participants in this flight to cause this airplane to crash. And in that respect, it's really unfortunate. It makes this accident so tragic.
Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
This is the science of stupid. Warning! Do not copy the actions of the people you are about to see. They took science for a fool, and science took them to the cleaners. Yes, this is the show that combines science with stupidity. Be prepared for half an hour of jaw-dropping lunacy as everyday people risk life and limb for amateur stunts and cheap thrills. We'll reveal what went wrong and why by exploring such scientific marvels as centrifugal force, momentum, center of mass, and equal and opposite reaction. It's a cruel world out there, so pay attention to science or pay the price. And don't try any of this at home, or anywhere else for that matter. Watch out! It's the science of stupid. In this show, we'll discuss how to control the force of weight. Not like that. Balancing over pivot points. Or not. And the relationship between velocity and force. It's surprising. But first, this. Call me old-fashioned,
but I tend to see bins as a device for putting rubbish in. But there are other people who see them as essential apparatus for an urban sport with two disciplines.
There's the side approach and the high entry approach.
This is gonna hurt.
Certainly does if you hit the sides.
You all right, dude?
Probably not.
Be it landing in broken concrete or breaking your ribs, nothing seems to deter the avid bin jumper from diving right in. But science is here to ease the pain.
To jump from the side, he starts by running to give him horizontal velocity. He then jumps using both feet. This applies maximum downwards force and converts as much of that horizontal velocity to vertical velocity as possible, giving him enough height fast enough to land inside the bin. Another method is to use a high launch point, but be aware, more height means more airtime, and for every second you fall, gravity accelerates you by 22 miles an hour.
And that's a clue to just how dangerous this is. Now first, the side approach, and to get maximum power, there's a couple of things to consider.
1 foot can give distance, but it's harder to get the height. 2 feet can mean more power, but it won't help with aim. Okay, let's just focus on height. He's using a shed and a trampoline. Nothing wrong with the height, but he hasn't quite nailed the distance. I'd ditch the trampoline if I were you, mate. Here's a more straightforward approach, but no less painful. How about trying a bin you can actually fit into? Now that's a huge bin. Surely he didn't. Yeah, he did. That was quite an accomplishment. Of sorts. Something's not right here. Now, what is it? Oh, that's it. Lid's closed. That's better. Plenty of height and a large open bin. You just have to keep it simple. Oh, what didn't you get about keeping it simple? Nothing wrong with height and distance, but by the time he gets here, his angle is rather off. And he hits the bin with a force about 5 times his own body weight. That's another bin on its side there. I wonder how that happened.
I don't need to tell you that guns are dangerous. But what if your bullets are just harmless little balls of paint?
Hey, you ready? Hold on. Let's go.
Did I say harmless?
This hurts so bad. I don't recommend this.
Neither do I.
Yep, even paint tends to sting at 200 miles an hour. Still don't believe me? Well, here are the facts.
As soon as a paintball leaves a gun, its velocity begins to decrease because of drag resisting its flight. And the faster a paintball travels, the quicker drag slows it down. Twice the speed equals 4 times the drag force. But after traveling 50 foot, a paintball fired at 300 feet a second will still hit you at 150 feet per second. If that paintball hits a soft, fleshy surface, the impact happens over a longer period of time, which does reduce the amount of force, but not necessarily the pain.
So, firing even from far away is daft. Firing from point blank is stupid. Well, that's the theory. A paintball fired from here at 300 foot per second would exert a pressure on his backside over 5 times that of a fully inflated tyre. But he's not going to shoot it from here. He's going to shoot it from here. It's okay, I've got some cream you can borrow. So how about a long shot?
He says he can shoot a apple off the top of my head. I somewhat believe him.
I somewhat don't. That's not the kind of long shot I meant.
Getting scary, dude.
Don't worry, over 50 feet a paintball loses about 30% of its momentum. But try telling him that.
Oh, dude! You suck at paintball. Well, could have been worse. Could have hit you in the mouth.
Yeah, you're probably right. Remember, it's not just distance that counts. It's where you get hit. For example...
It's gonna hurt so much.
More than likely...
Oh!
But probably not as much as... Don't forget, less flesh, more force.
Oh, it's broken the skin there. Look at that.
OK, so where is there even less flesh?
3.
Ah, yeah.
2, 1. I bet that hurt even more, dude.
No, I bet it did. In fact, you don't get much more painful than that.
Oh.
Well, maybe you do. They don't call them paintballs for nothing. This chap's rail flip is a masterclass in rotation. But what is his friend about to demonstrate? So, what science is this car park acrobat about to show us? It's forwards momentum. Or rather, lack of. As he enters the flip, he has lots of forwards momentum. But by pushing up and backwards during the flip, he then loses it. Cracking move. If you're a fan of large mirrors and grunting, then bench pressing is for you. But before you start, a few tips. Keep your equipment well maintained and clear of interior decoration. Choose a responsible adult to spot you.
Oh my God!
Not that guy. And above all, steer clear of bungee cords. Strapping lad. Another thing that can mess with your press is bad technique, but that's where the science comes in. The weightlifter keeps the bar level whilst moving it from just above his sternum to directly over his shoulders. This maximizes muscle efficiency and ensures that when raised, the force of the weight acts down through his shoulders without causing a rotation in either direction. If he moves the bar back, the force of the weight has a greater turning effect, making it harder to hold, so his spotter lends a hand. The correct technique also brings your pecs more into play, which can mean up to 20% more lifting strength. So it's not just massive muscles you need, it's method. And that starts with a push up from the sternum. If you need help locating your sternum, here's a clue. It's not on your neck. I know gyms aren't cheap, but improvising at home isn't always the answer.
Okay, I think that counts though.
I don't. Remember, I said near the sternum, not on top of it.
I mean, I totally had it.
Well, he's got it. And now he hasn't. The further that bar goes back, the bigger the turning effect and the less pec power you have, so the heavier it feels, especially when it's resting on your windpipe. And it also feels heavier when you don't keep that bar straight. You see, the greater the bar's angle, the greater the weight on one arm. If you're lifting 200 pounds, a 30-degree angle means you're carrying an extra 10 pounds on one arm. So keeping that bar straight is very important. Safe to say, he's done this before.
Let's go, baby.
I wonder if he's done that before.
Let's go, baby.
Here, the weight's evenly balanced. But the angle of that bar means his arm is taking extra weight here. And here? Well, let's just say it's one way of shedding the pounds. What, no spotter? Oh, well, I'm sure he knows what he's doing. Maybe not. I think it's time to call in your spotter now, mate.
Mom! Mom! Mom!
Now there's a surprise. Just imagine how strong his mum is. Hurry up, Mum. Everyone loves to dance. Trouble is, not everyone feels comfortable doing it in public. But he seems quite comfortable in private. I wonder why he's wearing that helmet. Ah, got it.
Damn it! Damn it! Ah!
Don't worry, there is a dance anyone can do. All you need is a little headspace and a flexible neck. OK, so headbanging is a touch repetitive. But that's not all. I mean, it does tend to make things rather confusing for your brain. A bit like science. Speaking of which, when you move, fluid in your inner ears sloshes around, stimulating sensory nerve cells which tell the brain about movement. When you headbang, the aggressive sloshing of the fluid can confuse the brain. And when you stop abruptly, the fluid can keep moving around for a few seconds. So whilst your eyes are telling you that your head is still, your ears think you're still moving, and the result makes you dizzy. Even with a dance as limited as headbanging, turns out there are some distinct styles. But are they all as bad for your balance? This lady here is going for a combo. Spinning head, shaky head, and the bum drop. The big circle style here, ideal for a spacious mosh pit. Not so ideal for your sense of direction. It's the violently swishing air fluid from continuously changing the direction of your head that makes this dance a real knockout. But not as much as that. The longest continuous headbang was apparently recorded at nearly 36 minutes. That's all very well, but overdoing it can actually disrupt the flow of blood to your brain. And guess what happens next? Well, remember, it's when you actually stop headbanging that your eyes and ears really start to disagree with each other. And your brain just kind of backs out of the room. Maybe you should try ballroom next time. Remember the swan lift scene from Dirty Dancing? Oh, come on. It's iconic. I mean, it's a wedding classic. Here's a proud groom lifting his beautiful bride into an elegant swan-like pose. And here's some bloke doing it with a mate in drag. Somehow not so elegant. Ah, young love. So romantic. Anyway, here's some science to keep your swan lift from becoming a swan dive. He lifts her into position by placing both hands at the top of her hips, close to her center of gravity. She arches her back to move that center of gravity in line with the pivot point at his hands. So the two are perfectly balanced. So, first of all, it's up to the lifter to get his hands in the right place. You remember where that center of gravity is, right? That's a bit low. How about you? Nah, that's a bit high, but it is easy to get carried away at weddings. I know I have. Now, if the lifter actually gets it right, it's up to the liftee to arch their back like a beautiful swan. She's having the time of her life. And he nearly ended it.
Are you okay?
Not arching her back meant her center of gravity wasn't in line with his hands, and she pivoted into the street. How about finding somewhere safer to practice? Next to a live rail track. That's probably worse. Minimum arch. Maximum pain. Remember, it's about grace and poise. That's why it's called the swan lift. Not the elephant lift. The lifter's grip was okay, but his rather unswan-like friend needs a lot more arch than that. It's not really a bloke's game, this, is it? You are about to witness something unbelievable, something incredible, something that you're not going to see very often over the next couple of minutes. A reliant robin actually managing to turn around in a circle. And now for something you're going to see a lot more of. Small wonder they used to call these plastic pigs. Sausage roll, anyone? I'm sure there must have been a perfectly good reason to fit an actual road car with a chassis that belongs on a 3-year-old's tricycle, but stability wasn't one of them. And here's why. A Reliant Robin's triangular wheelbase means that its center of mass is closer to the edge of that wheelbase than in a normal car, making it less stable. Any car turning a corner experiences a centrifugal force. This acts through the center of mass, trying to tip the car over. But because of the Robin's triangular wheelbase, it takes far less centrifugal force for it to tip on the bend. You'd think if a car was so unstable, they wouldn't let it off the production line, let alone on the racetrack. Well, you'd think that. But you'd be wrong. But are 3 wheels really that much worse than 4? Well, yeah.
Over, I think. Did he fall or was he pushed? That's the question.
And the answer is... yeah, he was pushed. You see, if your center of mass is that close to the edge, all it takes is a little nudge. Want proof? Well, as if you needed it. Oh, look, there's that wheelbase I was talking about. See? So, what happens when we introduce centrifugal force to the party? Well, that. And it's a common problem. See what I mean? And the tighter the turn, the bigger the centrifugal force. But aside from corners and nudges, Robins are great.
Absolutely flies over. Oh, God, trouble free.
Well, maybe not great. A bump provoked a wobble. A wobble shifted the center of mass, and the rest is history. A bit like the Robin. Right, that's enough X-rated violence for now. I'm off to wash my eyes out with soap and scourer. Remember, please do not attempt any of the stunts you've just seen. And we'll see you next time for the science of stupid.
Mom! Mom!
Not recommended for persons under the age of 12.
Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest global hubs on the planet and aiming to stay there.
Clear for takeoff.
But being a mega airport is never easy.
Failure is not an option for us here. This is Dubai.
It takes grit.
The minor thing would